10 years had passed since the fall of the Dominion. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. And at the heart of that change stood humanity and the alliance they had forged in the fires of war. The Galactic Council met in a great hall on a neutral world. Far from the former Dominion capital, representatives from over 60 species sat together as equals, each with a voice. Each with a vote. There were no masters here, no subjects. Only partners working together to build something better than what had come before. Admiral Sign Chai, now retired from military service, sat in the human delegation beside President Yoonji Moon, who had been elected to lead the United Human Federation through the difficult years of Reconstruction. Across from them sat General Velith, now Prime Minister of the Marathi Republic, his scales marked with the ceremonial paint of his people's highest office. The reconstruction of the former Dominion worlds is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Secretary General Han-Oh Kim, who had become the first human to lead the Galactic Council. Infrastructure has been rebuilt on 32 planets, and educational programs have been established to help former subject species develop their own governance systems. There are still challenges, added Morvex, who had been pardoned in exchange for his cooperation during the transition. He was old now, ancient by the standards of his species, but he had dedicated his remaining years to helping undo the damage of the empire he had once served. Many former Dominion citizens struggle to accept their new reality. Some still believe they are inherently superior to other species, and that belief does not disappear overnight. It took us generations to build that arrogance. He continued, it will take generations more to dismantle it, but I believe it is possible, because I have seen what happens when different species work together instead of dominating each other. You have built something remarkable, something the galaxy has never seen before. President Moon nodded thoughtfully. We did not build this alone, she said. Every species here contributed to the victory and to the peace that followed. Humanity may have lit the first spark, but it was all of you who turned it into a fire that consumed tyranny. Without the courage of the Marathi, the skill of the Kelzari, the wisdom of so many others, we would have failed. We are stronger together than any of us could be alone. And that is the lesson we must carry forward. After the council session ended, Soyan walked alone through the gardens that surrounded the great hall. The plants here came from 100 different worlds, carefully cultivated to grow together in harmony despite their vastly different origins. It seemed fitting somehow. She found a quiet bench overlooking a pond filled with luminescent fish from a world she had never visited, and sat down to watch the light play across the water. A familiar presence settled beside her. You look thoughtful, said Velith, his massive form somehow managing to convey gentleness despite his fearsome appearance. I was thinking about the prophecy, Soyan admitted, the one the architects wrote 3 million years ago. They predicted all of this, that humanity would rise, that the Dominion would fall, that the old powers would tremble. I wonder if they knew how much it would cost. Perhaps they did. Velith replied, or perhaps they simply saw the potential in your species and trusted that you would find a way. The prophecy did not make you who you are. It only recognized what you already were. Soyan smiled slightly. You give us too much credit. We are just as flawed as any other species, just as capable of cruelty and arrogance. Before we reached the stars, we spent most of our history fighting each other. We came close to destroying ourselves more than once. And yet, you did not destroy yourselves. Velith pointed out, you looked into the abyss and chose to step back. You learned from your mistakes and found ways to work together. That is what makes you different, not perfection, but persistence. You never give up, even on yourselves. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fish dance beneath the surface of the water. Finally, Soyan spoke again. What do you think comes next? Velith considered the question carefully. I think we have ended one chapter of galactic history and begun another, he said. The Dominion built their empire on fear and domination, and it lasted 12,000 years before collapsing from within. We are building something different, a community based on respect and cooperation. If we are wise, if we remember the lessons of the past, perhaps it will last longer. And if we are not wise, then we will make new mistakes and face new consequences, Velith admitted. But I believe we will find our way through, because we have each other. The Dominion tried to conquer the galaxy alone and failed. We will face our challenges together. And that makes all the difference. That evening, a ceremony was held to dedicate a new monument at the center of the council grounds. It was a simple structure, a pillar of white stone inscribed with names in dozens of languages. The names of the fallen, the martyrs who had given their lives for freedom. Ambassador Jinho Kang and Captain Yuna Park were there. The first casualties of the war, the spark that had ignited humanity's fury. Beside them were the names of millions of others, humans in Marathi and Kelzari, and representatives of every species that had fought for liberation. The crowd that gathered around the monument was diverse beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Creatures of every shape and size stood together, not as conquerors and conquered, but as friends and allies. Many had fought in the war. Others had been born in the peace that followed. All of them understood what this moment meant. President Moon stepped forward to address the gathering. We stand here today because of the sacrifice of those whose names are carved on this stone, she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. They gave everything so that we could live in a galaxy free from tyranny. They believed in a future where every species would be treated with dignity and respect. They trusted us to build that future, and we must not betray their trust. The prophecy spoke of humanity's fury, and that fury was real. We were angry at the injustice we saw, angry at the cruelty inflicted on innocent beings, angry at those who believed that power gave them the right to dominate others. But fury alone could not have won this war. What carried us through was something deeper: hope, compassion, and the determination to create something better. Let us honor the fallen by continuing their work. Let us build a galaxy where no species lives in fear. Let us prove that the sacrifice was worth it. As the sun set over the council world, casting long shadows across the monument, Soyen stood among the crowd and felt a sense of peace she had not known since the war began. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but its true meaning was not about destruction or revenge. It was about transformation, about the power of a single species to inspire change across an entire galaxy. Humanity's fury had been foretold, and the Dominion had been too arrogant to listen. But in the end, it was not fury that defined humanity. It was hope, and hope, Soyen realized, was the most powerful force in the universe. It could survive any darkness, overcome any obstacle, and light the way to a future that seemed impossible until the moment it became real. The architects had seen this 3 million years ago, had recognized the potential, sleeping in a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy. They had written their prophecy and waited for the children of Earth to wake up and claim their destiny. Now that destiny had been claimed, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the gardens of the council world, the lights of 100 different civilizations twinkled in the gathering darkness. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new problems to solve, new conflicts to navigate. But tonight, there was only peace, and the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if welcoming humanity and their allies to the future they had earned together. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Dominion, once an unshakable empire that spanned hundreds of systems, was crumbling from within. 23 of their 47 subject species had risen in rebellion, and the human liberation fleet had grown from a few thousand ships to a coalition force of over 50,000 vessels from a dozen different species. Admiral Soin Chai stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable Will, watching the combined fleet assemble for what would be the final campaign. Ships of every design imaginable filled the space around her. From the sleek human destroyers to the massive Marathi warships to the nimble Kalzari fighters, each species had brought their own strengths, their own tactics, their own burning desire for freedom. Beside her stood Velith. Now General Velith, commander of the Marathi Liberation Forces. His people had proven themselves in battle after battle. Their ancient warrior spirit reawakened after millennia of servitude. "I never thought I would see this day," he said quietly, his deep voice filled with emotion. "When I was young, I dreamed of fighting the Dominion. But I knew in my heart that it was impossible. Nothing is impossible." Soin replied, "It just takes longer than we would like. The humans taught us that." Velith said, "You showed us that the Dominion was not invincible, that their power was built on fear and submission. Once that fear was broken, their empire began to collapse. We only lit the spark," Soin said. "Your people provided the fuel." The final briefing took place aboard the Righteous Flame, the flagship of the combined alliance. Representatives from every species crowded into the massive war room, their diverse forms creating a tapestry of galactic life. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the Dominion homeworld of Velithor, surrounded by the remnants of their once mighty fleet. "The Dominion has consolidated their remaining forces around their homeworld," Admiral Chai explained, gesturing at the display. "Approximately 800 ships, including their last 3 super dreadnoughts. Our combined fleet outnumbers them significantly, but they have the advantage of defensive positions and orbital fortifications. More importantly, they are fighting for their survival, and desperate enemies are dangerous enemies." General Velith stepped forward. "My people have studied the Dominion defenses for generations," he said. "We know their weaknesses, the gaps in their sensor coverage, the timing of their patrol rotations. We can get strike teams to the surface if the fleet can draw their attention." "What happens when we reach the surface?" asked Admiral Yunath of the Kalzari, her insectoid form clicking with anticipation. "We take the council chamber," Soin replied. "The Dominion has always been ruled from the top down, and without their leaders, their remaining forces will have no one to give orders. We offer them a chance to surrender, and if they refuse, we end their government by force." "And the civilians?" asked a voice from the back of the room. It was Representative Hanul Kim, a human diplomat who had spent the war negotiating with former Dominion subjects. "We are not the Dominion," Soin said firmly. "We do not make war on innocent people. Our quarrel is with the leaders who chose conquest over coexistence, not with the ordinary citizens who were born into a system they did not create. If we become like them, then everything we have fought for means nothing." The room fell silent. Considering her words, these species had suffered terribly under Dominion rule, and many harbored deep hatred for their former masters. But one by one, they nodded in agreement. Vengeance would not guide them. Justice would. The Battle of Velithor began at dawn. Measured by the planet's rotation, the Liberation Fleet emerged from hyperspace in 3 waves, each wave targeting a different section of the Dominion defenses. The fighting was brutal from the first moment. The Dominion knew that this was their last stand, and they fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Their weapons cut through the Allied formation, destroying dozens of ships in the opening minutes. But the Liberation Fleet had faced desperation before. They were fighting for something greater than survival. They were fighting for freedom, for the future, for the memory of every being who had suffered under Dominion tyranny. The human ships led the charge, drawing fire away from the more vulnerable Allied vessels. They twisted through the killing fields with the grace of dancers. their pilots pushing their craft to the limits of what was physically possible. Behind them came the Marathi heavy ships, their powerful weapons hammering at the Dominion defensive platforms. The Kelzari fighters swarmed around the enemy fleet like angry insects, their small weapons finding gaps in armor and shield coverage in the chaos of battle. A transport ship carrying General Veleth and his strike team slipped through the defensive line. The Dominion sensors, overwhelmed by the scale of the engagement, never detected them. They landed in the heart of the Dominion capital, in a plaza that had once been used for public executions of rebels. Now it would witness the end of the empire itself. The strike team fought their way through the streets, past desperate guards and panicking officials. The Dominion had never faced a ground assault on their homeworld before, and their security forces were not prepared for the combined fury of Marathi warriors and human Special Forces. High Archon Valathos waited in the council chamber. Surrounded by the remaining counselors, they had watched the battle on holographic displays, had seen their fleet slowly driven back, had heard the explosions growing closer as the strike team advanced. "We should surrender," Elder Moravec said weakly. "There is no shame in accepting defeat when defeat is inevitable." "I will not bow to lesser species," Valathos snarled. But his voice lacked its old confidence. "I will not see our civilization humiliated." "Our civilization humiliated itself," Moravec replied. "We had the chance to share the galaxy with others, to build something lasting and good. Instead, we chose domination and cruelty. The prophecy warned us, and we were too arrogant to listen. Now we must face the consequences of our choices." The doors to the chamber burst open. General Vela strode in first, his weapon raised, his ancient armor scarred from a dozen battles. Behind him came Admiral Chai and a squad of human soldiers, their faces grim but controlled. "High Archon Valathos," Soin said formally, "the Dominion fleet has been defeated, and your capital is under our control. You have two choices: surrender unconditionally and face trial for your crimes against the galaxy, or resist and watch your council die before your eyes." Valathos looked around the chamber at his fellow counselors. Some were trembling with fear, others were resigned, and a few still glared with defiance, but none of them moved to resist. The fight had gone out of them at last. "We surrender," Moravec said before Valathos could speak. "On behalf of the Dominion Council, we accept your terms." Valathos opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He looked at Soin, at the human who had destroyed everything he had believed in, and finally understood. He had thought the humans were primitives, savages from a death world with no place among the civilized species of the galaxy. He had been wrong. They were something far more dangerous. They were liberators, avengers, and the instruments of a prophecy that had waited 3 million years to be fulfilled. As the guards led him away in restraints, Valathos passed the great window that overlooked the burning city in the distance. He could see the flags of the Liberation Alliance being raised over the buildings that had once symbolized Dominion power. The age of empire was over. Something new was beginning. The news of the Dominion's defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire on 47 conquered worlds. The subject species watched the recordings with disbelief, then wonder, then something that had not existed in their hearts for generations: hope. The Marathi were the first to rise. They were a proud people who had been conquered 8,000 years ago, their warriors reduced to laborers and their culture nearly erased by Dominion rule. When they saw the human ships tearing through the Dominion fleet, something ancient awakened in their blood on the mining world of Marathi Prime. A worker named Veleth stood before a crowd of 10,000 of his people. "Our ancestors spoke of a day when the chains would break," he said, his voice carrying across the vast cavern where they had gathered in secret. "They told us to wait, to endure, to keep the flame of our spirit alive until the moment came. That moment is now. The uprising began at dawn. The Marathi had no weapons, but they had numbers and they had fury. They overwhelmed the Dominion garrison with their bare hands, taking their weapons and turning them against their former masters within a week. Marathi Prime was free. The Dominion Council met in emergency session, and the great chamber that had once echoed with the confidence of eternal power now hummed with fear and uncertainty. Iark and Velithos stood before them, diminished, his scales dull and his posture bent with shame. "How did this happen?" demanded Counselor Xanath, her voice sharp with accusation. "You promised us a simple conquest, and instead you have given us catastrophe. The humans were not what we expected." Velithos replied weakly. "Their technology, their tactics, their technology is inferior to ours," interrupted Admiral Korthax, who had survived the battle by fleeing early. "I have studied the wreckage of their ships, and their weapons are less powerful than our own, their shields weaker, their materials simpler. Then how did they defeat us?" Elder Moravex asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. It was Korthax who finally answered, his voice heavy with reluctant respect. "They fight differently than any species we have encountered. They do not seek to match our strength. They find ways around it. They do not fear death. They embrace it if it serves their purpose, and they never, ever stop. Even when a battle is lost, they treat it as a lesson for the next battle. They learn from every defeat and adapt. We have been fighting the same way for 12,000 years because it has always worked. The humans have been fighting each other for their entire history, constantly evolving, constantly improving. We were not prepared for such an enemy." Moravex nodded slowly. "The prophecy spoke of this." He said, "The children of the death world, forged in endless conflict, would bring that conflict to the stars. We should have listened." "The prophecy is irrelevant now," Velithos snapped, some of his old arrogance returning. "What matters is our response. And we must crush this rebellion before it spreads further." "It has already spread," Xanath said, her voice cold. "The Marathi have freed themselves, and the Kelzari are showing signs of unrest. Our spies report that human agents have made contact with at least 12 of our subject species. They are promising weapons, training, support. They are building an alliance against us on Earth." President Minjin Wang addressed the United Human Federation from the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva behind him. The flags of every nation on Earth hung together, united for the first time in history by a common cause. "Citizens of Earth," he began, his voice steady and strong. "We did not seek this war, but we will not run from it. The Dominion believed that we were weak because we are young, primitive because our ships are small, helpless because we are only one world against an empire of hundreds. They were wrong. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. We survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have wiped out lesser species. We fought each other for thousands of years, and in that fighting, we learned lessons that the Dominion never had to learn. We learned that the strongest do not always win. We learned that determination matters more than numbers. We learned that a single person willing to sacrifice everything can change the course of history. The Dominion has ruled this region of the galaxy for 12,000 years. In that time, they have grown complacent, arrogant, convinced of their own superiority. They have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. We have never forgotten. Today, I announce the formation of the Liberation Fleet. Our mission is not merely to defend Earth, but to free every species that suffers under Dominion rule. We will take the war to them, and we will not stop until every chain is broken." The assembly erupted in cheers, but President Wang raised his hand for silence. "I must also share difficult news," he continued. "This war will be long and costly, and many of us will not live to see its end. The Dominion has resources we cannot match. Numbers we cannot equal, but we have something they do not have. We have the will to fight until our last breath. We have the courage to face impossible odds. And we have the hearts of every oppressed being in this galaxy, watching us, hoping that we will succeed. We cannot fail them. We will not fail them. In the weeks that followed, the Liberation Fleet launched its first offensive. Admiral Soi Chai led a strike force of 200 ships against the Dominion shipyards at Varick Station, one of the largest military installations in enemy space. The battle was fierce, unlike the fight at Earth. The Dominion was prepared this time, and they had studied the human tactics. They spread their ships to prevent being outmaneuvered, used their superior firepower to create killing zones, and held their positions with discipline. But the humans had learned too. They had expected the Dominion to adapt, and they had prepared new strategies of their own. The human ships attacked in waves, each wave probing for weaknesses, each withdrawal drawing the Dominion forces out of position. Slowly, methodically, they pulled the defenders apart when the final assault came. It was led by Admiral Chai herself. The indomitable will plunged into the heart of the Dominion formation, its weapons blazing, its crew fighting with the ferocity of people who had nothing to lose. The shipyards burned. 100 vessels under construction were destroyed, along with the supplies and equipment needed to build hundreds more. The Dominion had lost more than ships. They had lost time, and in war, time was everything. As the Liberation Fleet withdrew, they left behind a message beacon broadcasting on all frequencies. To the people of the Dominion's conquered worlds, the message said in 1,000 languages, "You are not alone. Help is coming. Be ready on world after world." The oppressed heard the message and began to prepare. They hid weapons in secret places. They identified Dominion weak points. They organized into cells that could strike when the moment came. The fire that humanity had started was spreading, and nothing the Dominion could do would put it out in the great chamber of the Council. Valathos received reports of uprisings on 3 more worlds. He watched the holographic display showing the spread of rebellion like a disease across his empire, and he finally understood what the humans had truly accomplished. At Earth, they had not just won a battle. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be beaten, and that knowledge was more dangerous than any weapon. The prophecy had been right. The fury of humanity had been foretold, and the Dominion had been too arrogant to listen. Now they would pay the price for their pride. The Dominion fleet emerged from hyperspace above Earth, expecting to find a primitive world unprepared for invasion. Instead, they found silence. High Archon Valathos stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, watching the blue planet rotate slowly beneath them. His sensors showed cities, infrastructure, satellites, all the signs of a technological civilization, but there were no defense fleets, no orbital platforms, no weapons pointed at his armada. "They have no navy," Commander Yeltrix reported, her compound eyes scanning multiple data streams at once. "Our scans detect military installations on the surface, but nothing in orbit." "They knew we were coming," Valathos mused. "The beacon from their diplomatic ship would have warned them. Yet, they did not flee." "Perhaps they are accepting their fate," suggested Admiral Korthax, a veteran of 30 planetary conquests. "Some species simply give up when faced with overwhelming force." Valathos considered this. But something felt wrong. The humans had threatened him, had spoken of ancient prophecies and hidden preparations. Such creatures did not simply surrender. "Begin the bombardment," he ordered. "Target their major cities first, then their military bases. We will teach them the cost of defiance." The Dominion fleet moved into formation, 1,200 ships arranging themselves in the precise patterns that had brought death to dozens of worlds before. Energy weapons charged, missiles armed, and targeting systems locked onto the helpless planet below. The first volley never launched, without warning. Space itself seemed to tear open around the Dominion fleet. From the wounds in reality emerged ships unlike anything Valathos had ever seen. They were sleek and dark, built for speed and violence, and they numbered in the thousands. Where did they come from? Korthax demanded, his voice rising with shock. There is nothing on our sensors. No jump signatures, no hyperspace trails. They were already here, Yaltrix said slowly, understanding dawning in her alien mind. Hidden somehow. Waiting the human fleet did not announce itself or demand surrender. It simply attacked. The first wave of missiles struck the outer ring of Dominion. Ships before their shields could fully activate explosions bloomed in the darkness of space, and 3 cruisers died in the opening seconds of the battle. Velastos watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet, the pride of the Dominion, fell into chaos. Return fire, he commanded. All ships, engage the enemy. The Dominion weapons were powerful, designed to crack open fortified worlds and vaporize entire civilizations. They reached out toward the human ships with beams of pure destruction, but the human vessels danced through the fire like leaves in a storm. They were faster than anything Valathos had ever encountered, more maneuverable than should have been physically possible. His gunners could not track them, could not predict their movements. How are they doing this? Korthax shouted as another section of the fleet vanished in fire. Their ships are smaller than ours. Their technology should be inferior. On the bridge of the human flagship Indomitable Will, Fleet Admiral Soing Chai watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, training with ships that officially did not exist, using technology that the galaxy believed impossible. The Dominion relies on mass and firepower, she said to her tactical officer. They conquer by overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers. They have never faced a species that refused to fight on their terms. The human strategy was simple but devastating. Instead of meeting the Dominion in a traditional battle line, the human ships attacked in small groups, striking weak points and then withdrawing before the enemy could concentrate fire. They targeted engines and weapon systems, crippling ships rather than destroying them outright. Each disabled vessel became an obstacle for the others, creating confusion and blocking firing solutions. Admiral, the Dominion flagship is attempting to retreat, reported her sensor officer. They are charging their hyperspace drives. Soing smiled coldly. Show them why that is a mistake. A single human ship, smaller than the rest, broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the Eternal Judgment. It moved with impossible speed, dodging through the crossfire of the battle like a ghost. Valathos saw it coming and ordered every weapon on his ship to fire at the approaching vessel. Beams and missiles filled the space between them, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ship did not slow down. It twisted and spiraled through the barrage, somehow finding paths through the wall of death. And in the final moment before impact, it launched a single device at the Eternal Judgment. The device attached to the flagship's hull and released a pulse of energy that spread across the ship's surface. Every system on the Eternal Judgment went dark. Engines failed, weapons went silent, and even the life support flickered before emergency backups activated. What have they done to us? Valathos demanded. But no one could answer. His ship was dead in space, helpless, surrounded by the burning remains of his fleet. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 800 Dominion ships had been destroyed, and 300 more were disabled. The remaining vessels had scattered, fleeing in every direction, carrying news of the disaster back to Dominion space. Admiral Chai stood on her bridge, looking at the debris field that filled the space around Earth. Secure the prisoners, she ordered, and find the High Archon, for I want him alive on the crippled Eternal Judgment. Valathos waited in the darkness of his command deck. He could hear human boots marching through the corridors of his ship, could hear the sounds of his crew surrendering without a fight when the door to his bridge opened. He expected soldiers. Instead, a single woman entered, unarmed. Wearing the uniform of a human admiral, High Archon Velithus, Soin said calmly, "I am Admiral Chai, and I have come to deliver a message. Kill me and be done with it." Velithos spat. "Your kind does not take prisoners. You are wrong about that." "As you were wrong about many things," Soin replied. "We take prisoners when it serves our purpose. And you will serve a very important purpose. You will return to your council and tell them what happened here. You will tell them that humanity is not a lesser species to be conquered. You will tell them that every world they have enslaved will hear of this battle, will learn that the Dominion can be defeated. And you will tell them that this is only the beginning." Velithos stared at her. "Finally understanding. You want me to spread fear. I want you to spread truth." Soin corrected. "The truth that your empire's days are numbered. The truth that the prophecy was right. You had 12,000 years to build something better than tyranny, and you chose conquest instead. Now you will face the consequences." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. Archon, you killed Ambassador Kang and Captain Park and their entire crew. They were good people who came to you in peace. We remember them, and we will not forget what you did. Every action we take from this day forward will be in their memory." As she left, Velithos sat alone in the darkness of his ruined flagship for the first time in his long life. He felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. The prophecy had warned them, but they had been too arrogant to listen. Now humanity's fury had been unleashed, and Velithos knew with terrible certainty that the galaxy would never be the same. The ancient texts were clear, written in languages that predated the first starships of the Dominion by 3 million years. They spoke of a world wrapped in blue and green, spinning around a yellow star at the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm. They warned of creatures born from violence, forged in the fires of a death world where everything fought to survive. The keepers of the archive had translated these warnings 1,000 times over the centuries, and every translation said the same thing. When the children of the third rock awaken to the stars, the old powers will tremble, and those who strike first will be the first to fall. High Archon Velithos of the Dominion Council dismissed the prophecy with a wave of his four-fingered hand. He stood in the great chamber of the council, his silver scales catching the light of the artificial suns that hung above the assembly. Around him sat the representatives of 47 conquered species, all of them silent, all of them obedient. The Dominion had ruled this sector of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed civilizations, and turned proud warrior races into servants. What could one small species from an insignificant planet possibly do to threaten their eternal reign? "The humans have sent another diplomatic vessel," announced Commander Yeltrix, her insectoid eyes scanning the holographic display before her. "They request formal recognition and trade agreements." Velithos let out a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. "This is the 5th such request in 2 of their years," he said. "They are persistent. I will grant them that." "Perhaps we should respond," suggested Elder Moravex, the oldest member of the council. His voice was weak. His scales faded to dull gray with age. The prophecy is superstition." Velithos interrupted. "Written by a species that died out before our ancestors learned to make fire." "They were the architects," Moravex said quietly. "They built the jump gates we still use today, and their predictions have never been wrong." Velithos stood from his throne, his full height of 3 meters casting a shadow over the old elder. "Then let us test their prediction," he said with cruel amusement. "Send a response to the humans, and tell them we accept their request for a meeting." The council chamber fell silent. Even the conquered representatives looked up with something like surprise in their eyes. "You intend to negotiate?" Yeltrix asked. "I intend to demonstrate," Valathos replied. "These humans need to learn their place in the galaxy. And we will teach them with fire and blood." The human diplomatic ship Souls Promise arrived at the designated coordinates 3 weeks later. Captain Una Park stood on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the view screen that showed the massive Dominion warfleet waiting for them, 1,200 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Beside her stood Ambassador Jinho Kang, a man known for his patience and his ability to find common ground with even the most difficult negotiating partners. "That is not a welcoming committee," Una said quietly. Jinho nodded, his expression calm despite the display of overwhelming force before them. "No, it is not," he agreed. "But we came to talk, and we will talk." The communication array crackled to life, and the face of High Archon Valathos appeared on the screen. His silver scales seemed to glow with self-satisfaction as he looked down at the tiny human vessel surrounded by his fleet. "Humans," he said, his translator rendering his words in flat, emotionless tones. "You have requested recognition from the Dominion, and we have decided to grant your request." "We are honored," Jinho replied, bowing slightly. "We hope this can be the beginning of a peaceful relationship between our peoples." Valathos made that laughing sound again. "There will be no relationship," he said. "There will be only submission. For you see, little creatures, the Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species. We offer only 2 choices. Serve us willingly, or be conquered and serve us anyway." Jinho's expression did not change. "And if we choose neither, then your world burns," Valathos said simply. "Your cities become ash, your people become slaves, and your name becomes a footnote in our history. We have done this 47 times before, and we will do it again." The Bridge of the Souls. Promise was silent for a long moment. Una's hands gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The crew around her stood frozen, their faces showing the fear that any rational being would feel in this moment, but Jinho simply smiled. It was not a happy smile or a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just received very bad news and was deciding how to deliver worse news in return. "High Archon," he said softly, "I must tell you something about my people. We have a very long memory, and we do not forget those who threaten our home. We also have a saying: those who want peace must prepare for war, and we have been preparing for a very, very long time." Valathos leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Is that a threat, little human?" "It is a warning," Jinho replied. "The same warning that was given to you long ago, written in texts older than your Dominion. We did not write those words, but we know them. We know what we are, and we know what we can become when pushed. I came here hoping for peace, and I still hope for it. But if you choose war, then you should know that humanity will not simply fight back. We will remember every ship you send against us. We will remember every world you have conquered. And we will not stop until the Dominion exists only in memory." For the first time, something flickered in Valathos's eyes. It might have been doubt, or it might have been anger. "You have 1 ship," he said. "We have 1,200. Then you should have brought more," Una said. Speaking for the first time, Valathos stared at her for a moment, then cut the transmission. The view screen went dark, and then the Dominion fleet opened fire. The Soul's Promise never had a chance. In less than 30 seconds, the diplomatic vessel was reduced to scattered debris floating in the void of space on the bridge of his flagship. Valathos watched the destruction with satisfaction. "Send word to the fleet," he commanded. "We move on the human homeworld immediately. Let us end this before it begins." As his ships turned toward Earth, he did not notice the small beacon that had launched from the Souls promise in the final moments before its destruction. The beacon carried a simple message. Transmitted on every frequency humanity monitored, it carried Ambassador Kang's last words. Spoken calmly even as death approached, "They have chosen. And now they will learn, wake the sleepers, and let humanity rise." Across the galaxy, on 100 hidden stations and 1,000 secret bases, lights began to turn on. The fury that had been foretold was about to be unleashed.